Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Couple things before we get into our show. First of all, if you got any questions or comments on the show, email me, john@wordballoon.com. Follow me on Twitter. That's where I do most of my talking, @JohnWordBalloon. You can follow me also on Facebook under my name, John Suntress, and also the Word Balloon Network. Tell a friend. I also am on Instagram under Word Balloon. If you get this show via podcasting platforms, please rate it or write a review if you don't mind. You can write me a bad review. You can give me bad stars, but like me as well as the opportunity presents itself. Also, I have a YouTube channel, Word Balloon. Please go there and subscribe. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. I have over 500 subscribers. I'm trying to get over 1,000. I'd like to add more video content, so please consider doing all that to support Word Balloon. And now, back to the show.
Terrificon, Connecticut's biggest Comic-Con, returns to Mohegan Sun, August 9th to the 11th. Meet Billy D. Williams, Val Kilmer, Doctor Who's John Barrowman, and the voices from Animaniacs and Thundercats. New England's largest guest list of comic book artists from DC and Marvel Comics is at Terrificon on August 9th to the 11th at Mohegan Sun. Tickets on sale now at Terrificon.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, very excited to welcome J. Michael Stracynski to Word Balloon today for a great conversation. He let me call him Joe. That's cool. Joe has a new book out, an autobiography called Becoming Superman. It's out today. It was amazing. Joe had an incredible journey to his successful career, and he goes into pretty painful details about that. A very tough and messed up childhood, an abusive father, a family background that is frightening to say the least, but he's very candid about that. His formative years in high school and college that led him to his writing career, and we dive deep into a lot of big Joe Stracynski projects. Of course, we talk a lot about Babylon 5. We talk about the movie Changeling that he did with Clint Eastwood. Of course, we talk about his comic book work at Marvel and at DC. Becoming Superman is the title, and one of the reasons why, when he got the opportunity to write Superman, he did, and he had the run on the monthly series, and then also had the 2 graphic novels. It's an incredible story, and also his years as a story editor on The Twilight Zone. We talk about some incredible encounters with people in Twilight Zone circles. Good timing, given this week is the week that The Twilight Zone premiered on television 60 years ago. Amazing. And he is not afraid to talk about the One More Day controversy from Spider-Man. His feelings on why he left Marvel. His run on Thor. We talk about his run on Fantastic Four. We go deep into Spider-Man. And you get a sense of the kind of guy I think that Joe is, and he's very candid about it. He likes to write things his way. Also we talk about his new project coming up with Bill Hemmes. Yes, Gemmis, but I guess that's the proper pronunciation. Bill Hemmes and Axel Alonso, their new comic book company. Joe is one of the principal creators. He tells us a little bit about what he's got brewing with those guys. I was very pleased with the conversation, and I was thrilled that he was so generous with his time. I'm always worried about first-timers not to go more than an hour at the beginning of the show because I knew we had so much to cover. I'm like, how much time do you need? He's like, as much as you need. Well, I took full advantage of that, and I actually felt bad because it turned out he did have another interview waiting, and I might have even run a little late, but thankfully his front man and the PR people are like, oh, no, he enjoyed the conversation, it's okay, and I luckily wrapped up just as they're like, are you going to be wrapping up soon? You only said an hour. So this is great. We got 90 minutes of J. Michael Stracynski for you on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your wonderful support via Patreon. Word Balloon is having, I think, a great year in terms of the guests, the quality of conversation, a lot of it with old friends, but also with new people as well. And as I said at the end of last episode, if you listen, July has been a great month, and I thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your support. This is one of the, oh my God, I can't believe I've had this conversation moments. This talk with Joseph Stracynski. More great stuff like that still to come before the end of the month. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free. But if you like what I do here and you want to help out the cause, is Word Balloon worth the price of a comic book to you a month? Is it worth $1 a month? If you think so, if you like what I do here, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Subscribe to Word Balloon. Thank you very much for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Hey, they just wrapped up their San Diego coverage. And I know they had a lot of good announcements coming out of San Diego. We'll be covering those in the weeks ahead with some of those creators. But, Aftershock, Animosity, Marguerite Bennett's wonderful book. Garth Ennis' great projects like Jimmy's Bastards and A Walk Through Hell. Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn and his new book coming soon, Knights Temporal. Juan Doe, also working with not only on Dark Arc with Cullen Bunn, but he's got a brand new book on the way. And there's also things like Chris Sabella's Trustfall, Matthew Klickstein's You Are Obsolete, my buddy Tim Seeley in Dark Red, just to name a few of the great Aftershock creators. Now, like I just said, in the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books, but you don't have to wait. Go to their website. They are great with not only giving you full story descriptions and preview pages, but you can read articles that appear in publications like The Hollywood Reporter that give full details of when they are in the midst of creating something new at Aftershock. So go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, those articles, and most importantly, the diamond codes on their books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. My conversation with J. Michael Stracynski, his new book, Becoming Superman, now on Word Balloon. J. Michael Stracynski, I'm gonna pull a Sarah Palin and say, can I call you Joe?
No, you must call me Your Highness. Nothing else.
Welcome to Word Balloon, Sarah. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I am a longtime fan, and I'm going to prove it by one of my early subjects. But congratulations on an incredible autobiography, and the perseverance to come through what you went through personally is astounding.
Thank you. I just really, to me, it was important to write the book to say to other people out there that, it doesn't matter what circumstances you came from, whether you went to the best schools or the worst schools, or your parents were supportive or not supportive, whether you come from rich or poor, that really just holding on to those dreams and holding on to the things you believe you want to do with your passions, in the end, if you keep going, it tends to pay off more often than not.
Well, and exactly, and I think a lot of people can relate. You have extreme circumstances, and I think a lot of people would say, my family isn't an Ozzie and Harriet family. Your example, and sadly, is to the extreme. The stories you tell about your grandparents and your parents are shocking, and I don't mean to trivialize them, but they'd make a hell of a movie.
More like, rather Ozzie and Harriet, more like Ozzie and Adolf.
Yeah, Jesus, no kidding. Oh my God, yes. I mean, that's what a shock to discover that. There were Nazis in your family. My God, that's horrific.
Yeah, my family is one of those trees. If you shake it too hard, really bad things come out of it. But I had avoided shaking that tree for a long time, and felt I was reaching a point now in my career, in my life, where I felt I needed to shake that tree and see what came out. And there were things that fell onto the ground that even I was surprised by, but I had to get it out anyway.
Understood, and it really is. It's an amazing start to the story. As well as your writing career as well, which is fascinating, and the behind the scenes facts you give us on your writer's journey are terrific. But man, you are really it's tough that first half of the book of your childhood, and again your family history. Man, it's just amazing, and choosing the title Becoming Superman, and you explain why, but if you could, just tell us why you chose that title.
I come from, as you know, just really hard circumstances. We moved every 6 to 8 months around the country from different cities to different states because my father was always running from bill collectors.
Wow.
He had a unique economic philosophy. Blowing the town went up a lot of bills and split. And it was a very abusive environment. And all that really kept me going through a lot of that was comic books, and in particular, Superman, who for me was a role model and something to aspire to be. And there were times when I was getting beat up all the time by kids and by my dad or whatever else, and I would just sort of, pretend I couldn't feel it, that I was invulnerable. And you learn persistence. And in a family that had no moral compass whatsoever, the idea of a character who could have been my father, who had a moral center, who never hurt anyone who didn't hit him first, was really important to me. And that character really got me through the worst parts of my life in the first half of the book, that then paved the way for the second half of the book to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we'll certainly talk about your time writing Superman at DC. I think I grew up with the same kind of Superman. I'm in my mid 50s, and it was the Julie Schwartz era, and it was the 70s Superman that I started with, but so many reprints of classic Kurt Swan Superman and that fatherly figure that he represented. Then I think DC walked away from him for a while, but I do think currently he's regained that kind of position as superhero dad, and that is really the mentor that not only the heroes follow, but again, there's just this genuine feeling of like a father figure.
Yeah, I think that they kind of walked away from that for a while because they were afraid it was getting corny, that it was old hat. But when kids are in their 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, they need someone to look up to and someone who they can aspire to be. And there are ways of telling that story and creating that character that don't require it to be corny, that can be heartfelt but not overwrought. And I think they finally figured out that there is a need for that out there, and they began, as you say, bending him back toward that.
Who was do you know Superman writers looking back that were your favorites?
Jesus, there are so many. For me, the ultimate image I have in my head of Superman is the Kurt Swan era.
Sure.
And in my home, I have a bunch of original Kurt Swan art pieces, from cover art to inside pieces, and one that was done specifically by him for me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely, man. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Well, again, people will be riveted, I think, when they hear your family, your journey away from your family, frankly, and some of the left turns. Man, you really experienced that late 60s, early 70s kind of world, too, because I know for a while you were, to get away from your family, you were getting involved with kind of those early 70s Christian groups as well.
Yeah, there was a whole Jesus movement that happened during the early 70s that I got involved with, because what they offered and what was very attractive was something that looked like affection to somebody who was too young to know any better. And they love bombed me, they embraced me, they brought me in, and I became part of that movement for a time. And when I was in college, I realized I was coming to a point where the violence at home was so bad that I either had to leave, which I couldn't afford to do, or basically kill my own dad. Those are my career options. And I figured probably the latter is, problematic. So let's try the former, because laws, apparently.
Yeah.
So I moved into this religious commune and was there for quite some time. And then I discovered that the pastor was having affairs with the women in the church, alerted them to this. And the elders refused to do anything. And in fact, I became the problem since I was talking about this stuff. And they did everything in their power to try and make me recant and say it never happened. But one thing that comes out in the book, I'm sure, is that I am genetically incapable of backing down from a fight. I just cannot freaking do it. So I dug in my heels. They dug in their heels. And eventually I had to just leave. I left behind, a woman I thought I was going to marry, all my friends. I left there with absolutely nothing, but, it was the right thing to do. And that ended my flirtation with cult life.
Wow. Did any of the experiences in that ever rub into, like, Babylon 5 and some of the religious things that you kind of get into in Babylon 5?
It certainly doesn't hurt that I had that background in the sense of I tried always in B5 to treat religion respectfully. I'm personally, I'm an atheist at this point, but I never felt the need to take an axe to that. What's interesting is that the only way I could make Babylon 5 was to hold this entire detailed story in my head, which requires a brain like a bucket of snakes. And I discovered I kind of had that while I was living in the commune, because one thing they had us do one weekend was there was a room in the church that needed to be recarpeted. And they didn't want to pay money for it. So they sent a bunch of us dumpster diving at a carpet shop for bits and pieces that were left over. So, midnight raid on an old dumpster, and we're pulling out pieces. The next day we go in and we put down the mat first.
Sure.
And then we're putting down the pieces. And everyone else has got these big swaths of carpeting. They're putting it down in big areas. And I'm working with pieces like 2 inches across. Just putting them down in a little pattern. Because there are some people who you ask them what time it is, they'll give you a history of the watch. And sadly, I am several of them. And we finally finish, and the youth director comes in, looks at this beautiful display, and says, "Well, I can tell the part that Joe worked on." And that's when I realized I'm good with small detail, which of course made Babylon 5.
Understood, absolutely, man. Well, we'll get to B5. And you kind of touched on it because your dad was ditching the bill collectors. How many different schools did you go to through high school?
It was 4 different high schools, 4 different colleges. I don't even know how many schools before that. I lose count. Wow. But my first 17, 18 years, he moved 21 times. Jeez. From New Jersey to California to Texas to Illinois, on and on and on.
Amazing. No, I mean, how do you obviously, how do you make friends? And you even address that. I mean, God, what a lonely life, and yet you found solace in a lot of great science fiction. And again, just being a few years younger than you, I can appreciate that when you discover sci-fi books and you go to the used bookstores or wherever, and you're able to, get reasonably priced paperbacks, and suddenly this galaxy is open to you, and then the amazing extreme possibilities. I mean, that had to be wonderful.
Oh, and you're absolutely correct. Part of the problem of moving all the time, as you say, is that you cannot make friends because there's no point, because you're going to be gone in X number of months. So I would, for the first 16 years of my life, I had no friends at all. But science fiction became that continuity for me. Because I could be on page 16 of a Ray Bradbury novel in Paterson, New Jersey, and move to Los Angeles and go to the library, pick up the same book, same cover, page 17, and keep right on reading. So science fiction and the literature of the fantastic became, for me, a home. It became the continuity I didn't have anywhere else.
Well, and again, thank God for a couple teachers that, among the many that you had through your high school years, that really did say, hey, you've got a talent. And that's, forgive the comparison, but I know I was in a school play, and they're like, oh, I was the narrator of a bicentennial play. And people are like, oh, you should be on the radio. And I mean, that was great to hear in 8th grade. And it's like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great job. I'd love to be on the radio. And I mean, really, that's what kind of drove me. So thank God for, great teachers. And there's one teacher that I'll get to, but obviously it started with high school. And then in college, you get to study at the feet of one of the great writers of short stories and radio plays. And I'm an old-time radio fan. Please tell me about Norman Corwin.
I will, before I get to Norman, though, funny story. The 2 teachers you allude to in high school were the first ones who saw any talent in me at all. And they encouraged me when everyone else said I was chasing stupid dreams. This was a time when we used manual typewriters. And sure. the creative writing teacher wanted, Mrs. Massey asked me to write a short story that they would put into the school magazine that year. And I didn't have a typewriter that I really wanted to use at home. It was very bad. So she brought in one of her home personal typewriters to the school to let me work on that in the classroom. And those are really heavy.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting at a desk with a plastic seat, little metal tray, and one of those very light desktops. And I'm working away, typing. I realize I'm out of paper. And I get up and walk to where the paper is, forgetting that the typewriter weighs more than the entire desk. And it flips. The typewriter hits the ground, shatters, keys flying in a million different directions. And I was just devastated and embarrassed. She was horrified, but said, "It's okay. These things happen. I have another one at home. I'll bring it in tomorrow. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be okay."
Wow. So
she brought in the other one. And when I'm in the writing mode, I disappear into my own head.
Sure.
And I'm working. I realize, oh, shoot, I'm out of paper. I snap. Oh, no. Second time. I murdered 2 typewriters in 2 days. I was never more humiliated in my entire life, and just a look of horror on her face I will never, ever, ever forget. But the other, as you say, the other person who changed my life was Norman Corwin. And at that time, I was in the mass communications program, which I didn't, for a master's that I didn't even want or need, and looking for something that would keep me sane. And I saw that Norman was going to be the special guest lecturer at San Diego State University. And how I got into his class is a whole different story unto itself. But I knew that he was someone who had been at the top of his career considered the best writer in America. He was in the radio drama era. He was more famous than Arch Obler and Orson Welles and any of those guys. But he had been graylisted during the communist scare in the HUAC hearing period, and didn't work again for almost 20 years. And I read his stuff, and I was just amazed by him. And number one, he taught me techniques and ways of approaching the work that I had never even imagined before. But I came at him at a very bad time personally, where I just come out of the cult and lost everything that I ever owned and everyone I ever knew. And I was angry at the world. And this is a guy who, again, was world famous, America's poet laureate. And to hear him talk, he never once had anything bad to say about anyone. He was never bitter about it. And had I been through that, I never would have recovered. And I thought, if this man can come through all of that with that kind of equanimity of spirit and grace and dignity, what right do I have to complain about any goddamn thing?
Sure.
So he, just by being himself, he healed me in significant and profound ways. And as a person, as a writer, there's my life before Norman, and there's my life after Norman, and the change was profound.
He was incredible. I know he continued to write, until the end of his life, and thankfully the CBC was still producing his works, which is pretty amazing, and I think NPR as well. I honestly, what a gift to experience that guy on a personal level. I think that's incredible. And yeah, man, if you're gonna meet one of the great, a writer, may as well meet one of the greats. So that's really cool. And then of course, a prophetic, casual crossing of paths with another great writer as well.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's editing's my friend. It's okay.
My brain was going chronologically. I was thinking, what?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, was that before Corwin?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So yeah, it's certainly before that. I started off my work as a playwright, writing one-act plays that were produced by Southwestern College, which parenthetically is going to be giving me an award in I think October.
Oh, that's great.
For just, I guess, being alive, because I think as a writer, just surviving is wonder enough. Although that being said, I have worked hard to support Southwestern. They have a food pantry there. That's when I was in college, I was often using my money for writing supplies and not food. And I weigh 140 pounds at 6'4". And so they set up a food kitchen a few years ago to help other students in similar situations. So anyone hearing this who wants to do a good thing, please look into the Southwestern College Food Pantry. You will do a good service. That being said, I've written a number of one acts for Southwestern College and one full length. And I was on campus for career day. That's right. This is my last year of high school. And they had sort of an opportunity for writers and artists and actors for various high schools present who were there to show off what they could do. And I was there as only one of the few writers, and so naturally no one ever came over. Put us way far away from any civilized behavior and people. And it's getting dark. I'm about to leave, and this gentleman walks up who looked kind of familiar, but I couldn't place him out of context. I can still see it in my head, the corduroy jacket and pants, open white shirt, hair in this huge pompadour, very weathered skin. That's one thing I noticed more than anything else. And had my short stories there, and he picked one of them up, sat down in this lawn chair, read it. It wasn't very long. Came back, got another one, read it, came back, and looked at me for a second and said, "You have a substantial talent for a person of your age. 2 pieces of advice. Number 1, cut every third adjective, which I am still working on. Number 2, never let him stop you from telling the story you want to tell." And leaves.
Wow.
And the academic advisor comes racing over like on a rocket sled. So what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? I told her what he said. Don't you know who that was? And that's Rod Serling. He's here to give a talk tonight at the college, and he must have walked in while he was just killing time. And I'm out the door. I'm ready chasing him, and he was gone. That frickin' apparition. But that stayed with me for years as the first validation I had from an actual writer that maybe I had something going on.
Wow, that's amazing. Good Lord. I love listening to his UCLA lectures. Thank God for YouTube, man. Thank God for UCLA keeping all that archive stuff. Yeah, that's amazing. And, of course, I'm interested in your time at the Twilight Zone. But before we get to that, I got to ask you about one of your first paid writing jobs on a great old radio show from the late 70s, and it blew my, I guess, 13-year-old or 14-year-old mind, Alien Worlds. I loved that show. And I love the backstory of that they, am I right, they recorded it at Casey Kasem's American Top 40 studio. And I don't know if you knew that. That's something I've read and looking things up about it. But that show was so great. It came out around the time of Star Wars, obviously borrowing from that, but really was just fun, callbacks to old-time radio, but also using the technology of today. And they were well-produced. They were well-acted. They were great. And you wrote one of the stories for them.
Yeah, it was a great show, and they used the techniques of radio in ways that really had not been done before. There was a number of them that pushed the border of what we could do on radio for a science fiction show. It was about a research station in orbit around Earth that was always dealing with alien threats. And they actually put an ad in the paper to find writers because most TV writers didn't know how to write for radio. But having come from a background with Norman and knowing what that involved, I was able to approach them. And a little script went up there for the production. And the only drawback with the production, we needed a really good bad guy. And they hired Dawes Butler to do the bad guy. Now, I don't know if anyone out there knows the name Dawes Butler, but he's most known for voicing Snagglepuss.
And Huckleberry Hound, I believe, right?
He had a voice like this. Exit, stage left. And every time he would have a point where he had to threaten someone, it would be like, "I'll kill you. Stand by." And I was like, "Oh, what did I ever do to deserve this?" So that was not the most auspicious beginning. But they liked my work, and they hired me to do a bunch more. Unfortunately, the show ended up being canceled because there was apparently some disparity between what they were telling the sponsors they were getting for an audience and what they were actually getting. And with that number surfaced, it was like, no.
Wow. Oh, my God. It was on one of the hard rock stations in Chicago growing up.
Yeah.
And, man, like Saturday nights, it was amazing. Alien Worlds. And that narrator has, the greatest voice second to Orson Welles in terms of that kind of ballsy power and everything. I'm so glad I found, some on, I think, the Internet Archive or whatever. And it was just like, oh, thank God, I miss Alien Worlds. So including your episode, I want to say Question of Conscience?
That's correct.
There we go. Excellent, man. Very, very cool. And then I'm jumping around. I mean, and then, years later, you get into, well, first of all, you write a how to write book, and that helped you out. But then you got into animation. And man, what adventures! And I got to tell you, man, I really have to watch the real Ghostbusters, because younger friends of mine are like, oh no, it's great, and it really is faithful. It's certainly in your early years with it, faithful to the movie, and you really kind of evolve the characters and everything, and also. I know you were involved with He-Man and Captain Power, and you have a great story, and She-Ra, of course, and then you talk about those. But, real Ghostbusters. Like I said, I have a lot of friends who I trust their views on comedy, and they're like, oh, no, that was a great show. And I know it's well loved by, people that were watching those Saturday mornings and stuff. I was a little too old. I'm sorry I missed it.
Yeah, Real Ghostbusters was an awful lot of fun, and it's actually kind of funny because I got into animation because I deliberately blew up my career in as a reporter for various and sundry reasons we'll want to get into here, and then got into He-Man and quit that show over various and sundry reasons, and then got into Ghostbusters, which I quit because they were sort of softening up the Janine character too much. I was quitting a lot of shows, and I realized I'm fit, but every time I did that, I got offered a better show, and I kept failing my way upward. Like, this makes no sense at all. But somehow it kept working out. But Ghostbusters was so much fun because, again, I loved the original movie, and it was a chance to delve into mythology and parodies of old movies. We got to use every imaginable type of creature and entity. And we kept the stories pretty serious because I believe that you write anything, you should write it for kids on two levels. One, simple enough for the kid audience to get, but also with enough smarter stuff on top, or story or character stuff on top that adults can appreciate it too. And so we got really obscure at times. There was a point where there's a demonic spirit afflicting an Eskimo tribe, and they need to put together a group of people, to fight it. And they describe it as an Inuit minion. And maybe 5 people in the country got that. And we were okay with that.
That's awesome, man. And man, you had to butt heads with, exactly what ruined animation for a period of time. And that is, not only the censors, but also all the family groups. And, they got to teach a lesson. And, God, it just dumbed down animation. And truly, that's probably one of the reasons why I checked out of Saturday mornings as I was getting older, and then didn't, care. Of course, girls as well. That's a good distraction. But, it really wasn't until, thank God, the 90s with edgier stuff. But you pushed back. And like you say, Janine, it's one of the great stories in the book about how they really wanted to, kind of defang her, and not in any evil way, but just, she was tough. She's Melanie Marin, the way she played her in the movie and stuff. And again, my friends told me that, no, the characters were very faithful in the cartoon as they were. And, you put, like you said, you push back. You won't back down from an argument.
Well, that goes back to what Rod Serling said, which is never let them stop you from telling the story you want to tell. And after we did Ghostbusters' first season, we were ABC's #1 rated show. We were nominated for an Emmy. And they brought in these consultants who proceeded, in my view, from a point of view of racism, sexism, and misogyny. And they thought that Janine, because she was a strong character and didn't take any lip from anybody and dressed in a very, adult way, not adult bad, but just, looking at, not like a mommy and bringing all soft clothing, that she was, quote, a slut. And that she needed to be made more of a mommy, made softer. She'd be more supportive, never raise her voice. And they even didn't like her eyeglasses because they were sharp. They were pointed at the end, and they said kids are frightened of sharp objects. And I challenged them on some of that. And they were using their research, quote unquote, to back this all up. I said, well, I want to see your research. Well, you have to have a degree in psychology to understand this. I have a degree in psychology, mofo. Let me see your research. And they just, were just awful. And I told the network and the producers, if you do this, I have to go, because Jane's our best character, and this is Wright's party line sexism, and I won't be any part of it. And I had to walk off the show because they weren't going to say no. The irony, of course, being that their version of that show then tanked. And a year or so later, they called me back and said, can could you maybe come back and write some episodes and put us back on track? And I said, sure, but I write Janine the way she was, and they agreed. And the most wonderful part is the episode where I brought her back. The story was about a demon, the Latin term being "makeover is lots of bucks," that was preying on her poor self-image to make her keep changing her appearance to make other people happy. And that's why her appearance had changed. And I was able to take some of the comments from the consultants and the censors and put it directly in the mouth of the demon, just to poke my finger in their eye, because they deserved it. And boy, were they unhappy with that episode. But we got it back on. We got her back more or less to what she had been before. As I said, I don't back down. I can't.
I hear you, man. Are you like? And forgive me, because I know obviously you make movies, you made a lot of television, live action television. Would you ever want to, with today's animation and the South Park era and everything that's come since and everything? Would adult animation ever interest you?
If I can tell a good story, I'm interested in anything. I don't care if we're doing it in cave drawings. Well, if there's a story I want to do, then I'm open to it.
And I'm going to jump up the timeline a little bit, because before I forget, it wasn't in my notes, but you mentioned that for Sci-Fi's website, you had was it City of Dreams, your audio, like that was kind of your Twilight Zone, where it was like a bunch, like an anthology kind of horror anthology. Am I right?
Yeah, I love anthology, and that was a chance to go back to radio. And the funny thing is, one of our episodes, we're listening to a audio drama with Tim Curry playing the guy who they brought in after Moses to pick up all the vermin in the world. And doesn't care for the job. It's a comedy, but you keep having this signal breaking in of two people talking as they were trying to do voice over internet for the first time, and having conversations breaking in and out of the radio show. And it was meant to sound like a real conversation going on, where there's like a murder planned and all this other stuff. And because the net was still relatively new, and because we made it sound authentically like this is actually a bleed over from an actual private conversation, some people called the cops. So, oh my God, I heard some murder thing being planned online. You need to investigate this. Like, oh, Jesus.
Hey, that's your own War of the Worlds. That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Are those available anywhere?
You can find some of them over on YouTube.
Okay. Oh, good to know.
There's something. Yeah.
And then one other radio thing that you did for a while, and I really would love to hear you doing it, was well before podcasting and everything, you were hosting Hour 25, and I know you. Am I right? It was called Hour 25, the sci-fi talk show.
Yeah, it was originally Mike Hour 25, then Harlan, and then I changed it to Mike Odell's Hour 25 in memory of the host who had started it. But after Mike passed away, and then Harlan was driven screaming out into the night after I think 2 years, I took over, and it was a great opportunity because for 5 years, every Friday night for 2 hours, starting at from 10 o'clock until midnight, we did interviews with the best and the brightest writers and producers and actors in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, on and on and on and on. And it was like I'm taking a master class in writing from the best in the world. And to spend those 2 hours every night was just phenomenal. The funniest one was, so we had Ray Bradbury on one night.
Okay.
And we couldn't pay them because we had no money for that. It's a Pacifica station,
right.
Listeners. But I would take them out to dinner beforehand. And so we were all at dinner, and Ray proceeds to get sloshed. And I think, oh, Jesus, how's this going to go? So we get to the station, and we start the program, and he starts off taking the position quite earnestly, quite sincerely, quite blotto, that the world, and America in particular, would be a better place if it was run by the Walt Disney Corporation. Because Disneyland was perfect. And I could not budge him off that position for 2 hours. I would take him in a different direction and talking about politics. Well, the Walt Disney. Well, there's issues in going to the future. How do you see? Well, if the Walt Disney. And this went on for 2 hours. I wanted to kill him and myself, not necessarily in that order.
And you had him on more than the one time, or at least? So,
oh, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
But we didn't have dinner beforehand. That's for goddamn sure.
Does Pacifica have an archive of Hour 25? Or are they available anywhere?
Sadly, no. They didn't. Well, yeah, not really. The problem was they couldn't afford to do air checks.
Sure.
And I set a VCR to record them, off a radio.
Sure.
Without realizing that the heads on the VCR were damaged, and tapes recorded on that VCR could only be played back on that same VCR. And when they finally broke down, I put a new one in. I realized that all those hours, hundreds of shows over the course of 5 years, were just gone. So it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, man. Oh, no, good Lord. I honestly, they made a Will Eisner documentary. John Cook did. And one of the best things on it is, in the special features, are all these cassette interviews that Eisner did with Kirby and Gil Kane and all these great comic book people. And he wrote them out. He wrote the transcripts as back matter for the Spirit Quarterly that he did with Dennis Kitchen. And Dark Horse collected them in a book and stuff. To actually hear the conversations, oh my God. So yeah, man, I mean, you were podcasting before podcasting.
Yeah, it was fun, and I always wanted to take those interviews and transcribe them into a book, but it never quite worked out. Particularly when we had Jack Kirby on and so many others. It was just a phenomenal opportunity.
Unbelievable, man. No, that's really, really cool. And I had to ask you about your radio years. Well, Twilight Zone. Man, I'll tell you, and of course we're in the midst of another revival of the Twilight Zone. That's a tough gig, and honestly, I remember in the 80s, and now it's funny, I would like to revisit them, because what a high bar to try to meet and try to recreate what Serling and Matheson and George Clayton Johnson and Charles Beaumont,
Beaumont.
Yeah, and Earl Hamner. I mean, all these great writers and stuff. I mean, they talk, and they're right when they talk about Sid Caesar's comedy writers, the great talent they had, and Serling had all these great guys, and of course himself as well. I mean, that's a murderer's row. So, tell me about the experience of working on the 80s Twilight Zone.
Oh, so I did one script for the Phil DeGuerre period, which was okay. But then when I was brought on to story edit the syndicated version, it was the first chance I really had to tell stories that mattered to me, that I wouldn't have to worry about continuity or notes. It was just, a creative freedom I'd never experienced before. And you're very much aware that you're competing with the best. So it really forced me to be at the best of my game. And I experimented. I tried different things. I dealt with personal issues. One last episode was about domestic violence, which I grew up with, and I wanted to sort of expand upon that. One episode was about a woman who would go to funerals for people she didn't know, which is based on my grandmother, who used to do that for real. She would go to strangers' funerals, eat the food afterward, and then bring it home with her in her purse. And it was, the creative freedom was just astonishing. We had a great producer, Mark Shelmerdine. And funnily enough, I mentioned Charles Beaumont. So when I was looking to buy the house that I'm in now a number of years ago, we were looking at different places, and I walked into one house, and I just had this weird feeling. I said, a writer used to live here. This feels like a writer's house. I mean, I couldn't point to any one particular thing, but God, it feels like a writer's house. And I'm walking around, and I see the guy who owns the house by the pool. I said, I'm just curious, are you a writer, or is someone in your family a writer? So, yeah, my dad was a writer. Who was your dad? Charles Beaumont. And I just about plotzed.
Yeah.
You're Chuck Beaumont's son? Like, can I just kneel down before you for like half an hour? Because those were also such amazing, talented writers.
Unbelievable. Absolutely, man. Well, and again, reading the comparison to the CBS show, and then, as you say, then you came on for that third season and then did it for the syndication. I again, shame on me. I didn't watch the syndicated ones. I only watched most of the CBS ones. But you make a good point, and I think you really boiled down the essence of what makes the Twilight Zone good. And frankly, well, first of all, have you seen the new one?
I haven't had a chance. I've been working my tokus off and haven't had the opportunity to do so.
But yeah,
parenthetically, one of the best things about working on the Zone was when they walked in one day with an outline by Rod Serling that he never had a chance to put into script for him. And suddenly, after meeting him when I was like 16, 17, to see a credit on television with my name and his on the same screen, how does that ever happen?
That's amazing. Yeah, man. No, that's amazing. And again, the UPN version that happened in the early 2000s. I mean, that's it. Like, after you work on something like the Zone, would you ever watch any of the future iterations or whatever?
Oh, of course, absolutely. It's just a matter of finding the time.
Sure.
But I think it's up to us to be supportive of prior and past zones. When I came onto the zone, there was a script that CBS had hesitated to produce, an adaptation of The Cold Equations that was written by Alan Brenner, which is a very, 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 very dark story. And the syndicators still wanted to change it. They were terrified of the story. And I said, you changed this, and I'm quitting. I don't care if it's a script I inherited from the other version, which was not necessarily the best, but this is a very good story. And I said, you will not touch this story, and it went through as done. But so I'm always been very supportive of those who came before and those who come after.
That's cool, man. All right, that's great to hear. And Black Mirror, have you had a chance to watch Black Mirror?
Some of the episodes, yeah, I think it's very smart, very well done. I love that we're coming back into a period of anthologization because the cool thing about it is you don't have to worry about continuity or creating an arc or merchandising. You're telling one character's story about something that's happened to them that they cannot explain to themselves or anyone else. And the chance to dive deep, you can go deep in an hour. And not worry about all the usual nonsense that goes into an ongoing series is a great opportunity for the writers and for the audience. So I think it's great.
That's cool. That's excellent. And a little later, and as we wrap with Sense8, I'm interested in what you think of the current. Well, we can talk about it now. What do you think of the current environment as far as network TV, cable TV, and now streaming as platforms and everything? Does it matter? I mean, I guess it does because I know there's some rules of over-the-air networks that cable and streaming don't have. But as you've experienced with all three, what are your feelings about where we are right now with video being given to us?
I think honestly we are in kind of a new golden age of television. I am so impressed by what I'm seeing, and what's been driving this is a number of different factors. Number one, the movie business right now has kind of gotten overly commercialized and overly franchised. I was talking to a guy at Disney who said our goal is to make movies whose concept is simple enough to put on the side of a lunchbox.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's driven a lot of writers and producers out of film into television. So they're bringing that kind of an approach. And last I heard, there were like 500 shows in production at the same time, which is why it's impossible to find a stage. And the number of showrunners who are qualified to run shows is relatively small. So a lot of them are saying, yeah, I'm happy to take over this show and run it for you, and I'll do this, but I want creative freedom. And so that's the only way to make it happen. So we're seeing a lot more unique voices out there. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is just freaking amazing.
I love that show. Yeah.
I saw Fosse Verdon.
Yes.
Chernobyl.
Yes.
Doom Patrol, which is...
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yes, man. I was going to ask if you're watching Doom Patrol, and again, as a comic book fan, isn't it ridiculously great? My God.
It is. You could never do that show for a network, not in a million years. And so there's the trade-off is we need money for shows, and the only way to get that is by giving creative people, freedom to do their own thing. And the result has been, I think, astonishing. We're seeing such an amazing crop of really good shows right now, and there's so much happening in TV that's not happening in movies. That's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, and again, leading up to Babylon 5, your other adventures in live action, I'll let people read about your adventures on Jake and the Fat Man and Murder, She Wrote. Interesting behind-the-scenes stories. I wasn't expecting those. I didn't know that I knew you were part of Murder, She Wrote. I didn't realize Jake and the Fat Man, and that's pretty crazy. But on to B5, because we are talking about how television has become the writer's medium again, and again, people taking advantage of what they can do. Now, you were describing, obviously, how great the anthologies are, but then, your concept of a novel for television with Babylon 5, and now in the era of binge-watching and everything, I mean, that's amazing, because obviously you were trapped by the weekly episodic world, and also the newly, Star Trek barely cracked the ceiling as far as syndication goes, and then that syndication network that you were part of initially with Babylon 5 was a big risk, and certainly probably had its constraints and made it difficult to make the show and everything. But tell me, just in terms of the concept of a novel for television, that's pretty bold. I mean, when you're not sure if you're going to make it past your first season, and you're thinking about 5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to bear in mind that prior to Babylon 5, no American SF space series other than Star Trek had gotten more than 3 seasons in 25 years, so the odds were against this. At that time, every show, particularly in the genre, leaving out soap operas that are just these open-ended stories that go on forever, every show had the reset button at the end so that every episode would then start the next week at a fresh point. There was no continuity because they were concerned, number one, that they wouldn't be aired in the right order in long-term syndication, and two, they thought that the average viewer had the IQ of basically a piece of lettuce with a wallet. And they just didn't want to go any further than that. And I said, no, I want to do a 5-year arc, and that sets up things in year 1, doesn't pay off until year 3, and all this other stuff, foreshadowing, clues, an overarching story that pays off and ends in the 5th year. And trying to explain that to the executives at the time was like, they looked at me the way a cat looks at a doorknob. You know, they know it does something, but they're not quite entirely sure what that is. And so we did the first year, and they were trying to keep up with what we were trying to set up, and they didn't quite understand it in the second year. So, okay, these first few episodes are setting up the following year to pay off in year 3. This is going to go into year 4. And their response was basically, we'll be in the car. You do what you're going to do. You be you. We're not going to put our hands on this because we don't know what the hell you're doing. And so they left me alone from that point onward to just, do the show the way I wanted to do, which is a remarkable opportunity. It came out of benign neglect, but I'll take it. And after we did that 5-year arc that ended where I wanted to end, Ron Moore over at Battlestar, who was created at the time, basically said, I want to take that structure and take it the next step over. I was talking to Damon Lindelof, who said when we did Lost, we wanted to use the Babylon 5 structure in that they had some problems with the network, but the general idea of it was there. And when those two then popularized it further, suddenly it kind of took off. And now we find ourselves today with all these shows that have multi-year arcs, which pay off better or worse than others. I actually had a meeting about a year or so ago with this one network executive at a cable service who I was pitching a story with a 5-year arc. He's grumpy, and he says, we got writers coming in here all the time pitching 5-year arcs, and they can never pull it off. What makes you think you can do it? Like, I invented it. That's how I know I can do it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's, I didn't come to Babylon 5 until when it was on TNT. And thank God the reruns and the standalone movies before the 5th season started, I was able to catch up. I think I don't know. My memory might be might be misremembering, but damn, man, that show it sucks you in. And I gotta you tell some incredible behind the scenes stories, things that about people like Michael O'Hare, the original lead, Jeffrey Sinclair of Babylon 5, and why he left after the first season, and I do remember you talking about it right after Michael's passing. I am curious in terms of having to have that sort of dilemma, losing your lead, and I'll let people read in the book, unless you want to discuss it, but I figure we got to save some stuff for people to read in the book. But just the difficulty in terms of just the story, setting up the story and having to switch gears and make room for Bruce Boxleitner and Sheridan when you were planning on telling Sinclair's story for 5 years. Was there a division of the character ever in your thinking, or did you come up with Sheridan whole cloth going, all right, well, we're going to, someone's got to be the captain now?
Well, what helped is that before we actually shot a frame of film, in addition to working out pretty much every episode for 5 years, which gave us that continuity we could stand on, that safety, I also had worked out trapdoors for every single character on the show up to and including Sinclair, because contrary to popular opinion, most actors are humans. And things happen, people quit, people get hit by trucks, abducted by aliens, things happen. And so I always had, sort of a backup plan if any of the cast, including Michael, left for whatever reason. So when I had to pull the trigger on that because of the issues he was facing, I was able to sort of, okay, plan B is already there. I know how this part intersects with all the branches of the story. I can move him to this train that goes over here, take this part of his destiny, transfer it to this character over there, and I'm still golden. I still get to where I want to go. I think that's the mistake some other shows make, where they don't. You have to plan toward your last episode. You have to know where you're going. If you're going to go on a drive to San Diego, you may be able. You have to start off saying, "I know I'm going to San Diego at the end." That gives me the freedom to go off the road a little bit and visit this town over here, visit this town over there. So you have room to improvise, but you have to know where you're going at the end, because that way you're playing fair with the audience and you're setting up things that will then pay off rather than being very arbitrary at the end. So even though we lost Michael, I was still able to keep the larger story on trajectory for that last episode.
Man, and also, of course, Claudia Christian leaving and Tracy Scoggins coming in. And then again, man, in one season, you give a shit about Tracy Scoggins. And it really, you thank God, it must have been another trapdoor to, come up with that replacement. Great cast, man, up and down. And it's heartbreaking that so many of them are no longer with us because they really, I mean, I love the show, man. Thank God Amazon was running it again. I've got the DVDs. I really do enjoy just kind of setting up Amazon and kind of binging as I'm doing my work and stuff and revisiting these episodes.
Yeah, I was talking to Bill Mooney about that recently. And, Bill comes from, of course, Lost in Space and worked in the Twilight Zone. And he said, I've been in television since, the early Cretaceous period. And I have never seen anything like what we've had with this show, with the number of passings we've had from the main group. The original Star Trek cast went, 25 years before they lost their first actor from the main group. And there was also there was all the Bewitched thing that was up against, what was the other show that we're competing with? One show had lost nobody, one show lost everybody. I don't know why the universe is picking on our show and our actors. It's not fair. We've lost Jerry Doyle. We've lost Stephen First. Jeff. We've just lost Andreas.
Is Peter still with us? Peter Jurassic?
Andreas Katsoulis, we lost. Peter is still with us.
Okay, thank God. Jeez.
And also Peter just did the audiobook for the biography.
That's great! Wow.
Yeah, I'm not a very good reader of words, so I asked him if he would do it, and he said, "Well, won't people wonder why you're not doing it?" So I wrote a brief introduction for him to read before he goes into the actual book, where he explains why I'm not doing it, including restraining orders, and at one point he says, "Look, here's the truth of it. Joe's a nice guy, but he has a voice like a sea lion with a slight New Jersey accent." So the fans will get a little bonus for the audiobook.
That's fantastic, man. Well, who better than Londo, who always was the storyteller at Babylon 5? So that's terrific. I loved the novels, the spin-off novels that were done, especially, didn't Peter David do the one that kind of bridged the 20-year period in some ways? I mean, we looked at David Sheridan and Delen's son as a young man, and it certainly got into the Drox, and I just felt like, I know Peter wrote for the show too. Harlan Ellison, Neil Gaiman, and Peter David, beyond you doing 99% of the scripts, right?
Yeah, and we also had Dorothy Fontana and a bunch of others.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize Dorothy Fontana. That's fantastic.
Yeah, they were a good bunch.
Yeah, man. Jeez. And would you ever want to? I mean, I know you told the 5-year story, but then of course you had Crusade, and certainly there is room in that 20-year period from where we leave off to the final episode to tell some stories in between. Would you ever want to do that?
Yeah, I would love to do it, or to reboot the show, but Warner Brothers, certain executives there who have some animus against the show, because it was done through Warner Brothers domestic distribution rather than Warner Brothers Television. And that means it kind of did an end run around certain executives who didn't much care for that idea, which is why you don't really see any of the P10 shows in syndication anywhere. They reluctantly let B5 out once in a while here and there, including to Amazon. But they've been told straight up that by Warner's that they will not allow anything to be done with Babylon 5 or any other P10 shows like ever.
Wow. Just that kind of closed-minded thinking. And again, not the first network story like that I've heard of, or studio story, I suppose. And again, your book is chock full of stories like that, so it's sadly not surprising. Yeah, Jesus. Because when Sci-Fi did Legends of the Rangers, I'm like, oh, cool, we're back. And then even when you did the DVD with the 2 short stories, I was like, oh, this will be great. This is a good way to do it. And obviously, I'm that's kind of tough. You were breaking new ground with the DVD shorties. Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking, man. And I followed your message board back in the day and would always be hoping, maybe I'll come back. So, yeah, that sucks. Well, that sucks. Would you ever want to do like it maybe in book form or anything like that?
I can't because, again, Warner's owns the rights to everything. All I own is the film rights, which unfortunately there's so much time has passed between the series and now it's hard to make that happen. But who knows what the future will hold? Someday those executives will quit or pass away once my ninjas can find them. And then we'll see what happens.
I'm a fan of both shows, Babylon 5 and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I'm glad you address that controversy and the obvious similarities and the steps you took to pitch to Paramount first in the book. Again, I think it's a great story in the book. I mean, can you watch Star Trek? I mean, and despite all these like terrible experiences with Paramount and some of the executives?
I can watch everything except that particular Deep Space Nine show.
Okay.
Because I just see my show with the serial numbers filed off. What's interesting is while we were shooting B5, I think it was in late first season, early second season, Peter Jurasik came into my office and closed the door, which always worries me. He said, listen, I was at a party last night, and one of the actors, the main cast from Deep Space Nine, was there. And he said, and this actor pulled me aside and said, look, we know that our show is based on your show. And from some of us said to me to pass it on, we wish you good luck. And that was like, quite a bit of a revelation.
Yeah. Jesus, no. But the stuff you detail in the IO9 article that came out in the about 10 years ago. I mean, that's an interesting revelation. And then again, I'll let people read it in the book. But what else were you going to say? It sounded like I stepped on you there.
Oh no, I'm good. That was just a sidebar to the issue.
I'm hip. Okay. And if I may, another great thing about Babylon 5 was you giving Walter Koenig the opportunity to really have a great role in Bester. And again, named from a great science fiction writer, I caught it right away, and I thought, oh my God, that's a great beginning. But man, I mean, everything he wasn't allowed to do as Chekhov, and really act and really, be the star of his own story came through in Babylon 5.
Oh yeah, and I knew Walter casually, and I knew that he was a much, much better actor than what they gave him to do. So I was determined to rectify that with the show and gave him this role that became, I think, really his favorite more than anything else he's ever done. Funny story, the first day he came to work, everyone on Babylon 5 had lunch in the same area, whether we were crew, producer, writer, actor, extras. We had egalitarian set up. No one was allowed to go to their trailers, and you ate with everybody else. And much of the cast members were sitting together when Walter approached with his tray. And Michael O'Hare stood up and told the others to stand up. And Walter said, "Why are you standing up?" And Michael said, "You always stand in the presence of a superior officer."
That's awesome.
From the Chekhov days.
Absolutely.
It's to respect,
That's excellent, man. Well, let's, if we can, I want to move on to comics and, acknowledge the great body of work you did in comics. starting with Marvel. Man, you came to Marvel at the right time, because really Marvel was kind of in the shitter in terms of creativity. And thank God guys like Jemison Quesada came along and were willing to kind of shake things up again. And it was pretty cool that they gave you Spider-Man.
Yeah, they had either come through bankruptcy or on the edge of bankruptcy. And a lot of writers weren't coming over there to work. They felt it was a sinking ship. So we need someone with some high visibility to come in there and straighten it out. And that all starts with Spider-Man. And as goes Spider-Man, so goes Marvel. So they said, we want you to take it over and just do what you're going to do, and we'll back you up. And I said, great. My only requirement is you don't change my words. You change my words, I leave. And they said, okay. and for most of that run up until the very last part of it, they abided by that. And I had just an amazing time writing Spidey, and took him places where, for instance, I had Aunt May discover his identity.
Absolutely, man. Yes, go on.
I've always prided myself on being a feminist, and when other writers would treat me like this fragile thing who'd fall over dead if she ever found out the truth, this is a woman who lost her husband, raised Peter as a single mom. She has a spine of titanium, and I always thought that Peter got his powers from the spider, but he got his strength from Aunt May. Yeah. And so I had her find it out, and the most amazing thing that I hadn't expected was I got all these emails afterward from people, after all the conversation, and she said, look, those who love you can accept who you actually are. I love you, I accept you. People had the courage to come out of the closet as gay or bisexual or and they said they would send me emails saying I had the courage to come out because of that story.
Wow.
What's interesting, you mentioned Bill Hamas. So he and Axel Alonso, who was the editor-in-chief of Marvel after Bill left, recently formed a new company, Artists, Writers, and Artisans, to publish a new universe of books. And I'm the head of the creative council for this thing.
Oh, wow.
And it's really cool. And we're doing a shared universe kind of approach that really no one has ever done before in the way that we're doing it. Me, I don't like to – you have two choices in life as a creator. You can either break new ground or fertilize old ground. And I'm much leaning toward the breaking new ground thing. I said, if you want me to come on this, I want to do things that no one's ever done before and creating a whole new comic book universe. And he said, we'll back your play. I said, don't change my words. We won't change your words. And I'm now 4 scripts into the first series, and we're looking to debut in October. And you're going to see stuff from this company you've not seen anywhere else. And I'm so excited about it.
That sounds great, and shame on me and I'm glad you point that out, because I don't want to forget Midnight Nation and Rising Stars and the stuff you did at Top Cow. That was my first notice of you on the comic book spectrum, and then it continued into Spider-Man. And I'm glad you mentioned the whole Aunt May thing and revealing Aunt May, because man, that Ramita final splash page of shock as she walks in and then he's asleep in the Spidey outfit and everything, and then the issue later when she's writing, right? Am I remembering right that she wrote a editorial or a letter to the editor to Jameson?
Oh yeah, she rather than just falling over dead, she becomes his biggest ally. So whenever a newspaper had something critical to say about Spider-Man, she's like writing angry letters about it and calling the editors. Well, my favorite part of the whole thing with Aunt May was at one point during the Civil War story, they have to move into Avengers Mansion.
Yes.
And everyone else is there, and there's a moment when Aunt May faces off with Wolverine in the kitchen. And Aunt May wins. It was like the best moment ever.
I'll tell you my favorite moment that you wrote in Civil War, and again, thank God you said something, because it just suddenly sprung to mind. The conversation that Spider-Man and Tony Stark have. And it's great because obviously they touch on it in the movies, and it absolutely is mentor-student. But I really loved how if you don't mind, if you know what I'm talking about, I'll let you take it because you're the writer.
Which one are you talking about? There's a bunch of conversations.
When Tony finally convinces Spider-Man to go to his side, and Spider-Man's like, Tony, you're smarter than me. So, essentially, I'm paraphrasing your words, but this is what I got out of it. Tony, you're smarter than me, and every inch of my spider sense is tingling and telling me this is the wrong thing. but I'm just a dumb kid, and you're Tony Stark, so I'm gonna back you. But if this turns out wrong, I'm coming after you.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because every now and then, and it happened later, of course, when the Kingpin went after Aunt May. But that's the thing, man. That is awesome because you absolutely capture his own self-consciousness. But every now and then, when the safety is off, Spider-Man is literally one of the most dangerous men in the Marvel Universe, and he should be. And that's what's great. And really, I loved that. And then further in the Kingpin moment, when he challenges him in the cell block and everything. I mean, that's high drama, man. That was great.
Thank you. And yeah, Spidey never had his chance to sort of rectify that with Tony. So when I did Thor for Marvel, one of the things I wanted to do was to pick that thread up again. And there's a point in Thor where they discovered that when he was quote unquote dead, Tony Stark cloned him for his own purposes. And Thor, having come back from dead, discovers this and has a little conversation with Tony about it. And essentially kicks the crap out of him and reminds him, you are a mortal man in a tin suit and I am a god. Do not forget this. P.S. You're walking home.
The nod, again, in Endgame that I felt they gave you in terms of New Asgard, it had to have been inspired by your idea of putting Asgard. Was it Oklahoma? I forget which state Asgard we hovered over.
Yeah, there's bits and pieces of my run both in Infinity War and Endgame, particularly the new uniform that Tony Stark makes for Spidey, which is right from the comic.
Of course, the Iron Spider, yes.
Yeah. When they offered Thor at first to Neil Gaiman, who ran screaming off into the night, and they offered to Mark Millar, who ran screaming off into the day. And then I said, I really want to do this book. And they said, okay, fine, let Stracynski have it. How much damage can he do? And they said, we want to do it with Asgard because usually it's out in space, it's somewhere on top of a mountain, another dimension. Where do you want to put it? And I said, Oklahoma. And they looked at me. You ever look in a fish tank and see a goldfish staring at you? It's that kind of an expression. And they're like, what? And I said, look, number one, it's great visually because it's Oklahoma. It's flat, 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 flat. Asgard, flat, 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 flat. And putting Thor next to Iron Man or the Hulk, there isn't that much of a difference. But putting Thor next to an average mortal, A, makes him more godlike, but B, also makes him more human. And the idea of the Asgardians showing up at town meetings and helping out guys who have flat tires. Yep. At one point where they're having this town meeting and they're saying there's this weird smell coming from the area of Asgard. And the question of indoor plumbing comes up. And no, we don't have it. Well, what do? Oh, we throw it over the wall. The goats love it. The frost giants, not so much. And it was just, and it worked. And there was not a whole lot of action in any of the books. It was just a character story. And Marvel was terrified it was going to tank because of that. But every single issue I did when I was writing that book was in the top 10 month after month after month.
Dude, I remember. I was buying all the issues. And let's talk about Loki because I'll tell you, man, the subject of transgenders is really a very individual point of view. And forgive me, audience, as a white cisgender man saying this, but that is my perception, that each possible toe in the water of transgender gets kind of dicey. What was the reaction? Have you heard the reaction from the transgender audience turning Loki into a woman?
What I heard was that they loved it. It was that she was accepted pretty much universally and loved the change in the character. I've always been interested in playing, I'm not playing with it, that's not the right term, but exploring gender issues in ways that are respectful and ask different kinds of questions. So in Babylon 5, we had Marcus and Dr. Franklin go off on a mission as a married couple. And
I remember.
No one thought two things about it. It was funny that it was those two who were gay marriage was so ordinary by this time, and no one cared. In the Zocalo and crowd scenes, I always had same-sex couples at the table. Delenn was originally going to start off as a male character, and we shot Mira with heavy makeup and was going to alter her voice in the gathering, but the alteration didn't sound good, so we ended up abandoning that. That when she came out of the chrysalis,
sure,
that would have been the transformation from male to female.
Oh.
Didn't work out. So I wanted to explore those themes again of perception and identity and gender with Loki, and then of course later on in Sense8, we again built on that foundation. I think it's a valid and worthy arena to explore respectfully and to deal with the questions that we're facing currently.
And I really think it fit in the specific case of Loki. Of course, Loki would play with gender because he's the god or goddess of mischief, depending on which gender he's currently adopting. And no, I thought it was terrific. No, I really and truly both on Spider-Man and Thor, working with Romita Jr. Johnny's awesome. I enjoy my conversations with him, and man, they gave you one of the greats to work with too.
Oh, absolutely, and Olivia Kleipel was amazing.
Yes.
On Thor, and the year that Loki came out as female, I was at San Diego Comic-Con. There were a number of women and transgender people who were dressing as female Loki.
That's great.
And I saw one with just a complete. One fan who was there, you couldn't tell the difference. It was just spot on. I said, I helped to create you. And when she realized who I was, tackled me and threw me to the ground. It was wonderful. So I love exploring those themes. And as with B5 and with the Spider-Man Talk with May, I've heard from a lot of people over the years who say that the books and the stories help them to come out and deal with issues of gender and sexuality that they were afraid to talk about openly before. And if I can do some good in that respect and allow people to have those conversations, then I feel I've done a worthy thing.
That's awesome, man. And my favorite Spider-Man issue before we leave Marvel, well, also your Fantastic Four run, I thought was great. I was sorry that you left, but before I forget about Spider-Man 500, the gift that Doctor Strange gives to Peter, and he gets to talk to Uncle Ben. And I'll be honest, man. I mean, I lost my father at a young age, and it really touched me because it was like, that's cool, man. That is the greatest gift you can give somebody.
Oh, sure, definitely.
That was awesome. And Fantastic Four, man, I was really enjoying what you were doing, and I loved how Civil War divided the family and all the mishigas that they were going through and everything. I was bummed that you left.
It was coming up on that time, and I was having to deal with more editorial issues than I had planned on because they were really big into the events at that time. And I had just come on to Fantastic Four, and we were at a retreat. And so we're going to do this whole thing called Civil War, and all the things that I was building in Fantastic Four that were going to go in one direction, I realized I would have to throw up in the air and forget about. The same thing happened with Thor. When I took on Thor, nobody wanted him. They didn't know how to write for him. I came back, made a top 10 book, and now somebody wanted to build this whole Siege of Asgard story around him and destroy everything that I had tried to build up up until that point. And I started saying, if you're going to pull the FF into this big event and Thor into this big event, it's your character. I respect that. You've got to do what you think is correct, but I can't do that. I can't undo all the work that I did to get this character at this point. I mean, and Spidey was all about bringing MJ and Peter back together again as a couple after having been separated by years, and then of course they said we need to unmake the marriage. I said that's not what I came here to do. So I respect it's your corporate position. You have to do this, but I need to do something else. So I would have loved to stay with FF longer, but the Civil War thing was sucking up all the creative air in the room. So I just figured I'm going to walk away.
Okay. Well, and I know it was interesting. I'll say this as well. Reading the autobiography, you didn't really address the One More Day controversy. Forgive the air quotes of controversy. I just remember being a reader then, and certainly following the ridiculous 24-hour news cycle that nerddom has suddenly acquired. But I'm surprised it wasn't part of the autobiography, frankly.
It was originally, but the problem was that the book was really, really long.
Okay.
Some parts of it had to go, and it was just it's well known out there. It wasn't like I'd be adding anything new that's not already out there in the internet world out there. And it was kind of a downer, so I want to get into it. But certainly, the last couple of issues were not what I wanted them to be, and it left kind of a sour taste in my mouth when things went the way they did. But at a certain point, it just becomes too internecine and too inside baseball.
Okay, yeah. Whatever. I mean, and like you said, it's well documented out there and everything. And hey, man, no, you added some interesting things to the Spider-Man mythos while you were there. Ezekiel and and certainly some controversy with Norman and Gwen getting down and having a couple kids. That was a big shocker.
Yeah, it was going to be Peter and Gwen originally, and I was having lunch with Bill Hammas and Joe Quesada. We're talking about it. And I remember Bill said, I remember the exact conversation to this day, was said, the problem we have is if Peter has kids, it ages the character beyond what he should be. And Joe said, why don't you make it Norman?
Wow.
And Bill said, that's a great idea. The fans will go crazy. And I thought they meant the fans would like it. Right? So I said, okay, if you think that's the right way to go, my spidey sense is tingling. But you're in charge, so I'm going to go with what you say. And, yeah, that didn't work out.
Well, hey, man, seriously, as you know, as a writer, sometimes it's good to provoke the audience. And I don't know. I mean, I certainly, will have my little nerd moments of, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. When Aguirre Scarza wrote the Fantastic Four, and it's like, okay, they're broke. And it's like, oh, come on, man. It's Reed Richards. He can, come up with an idea and sell it to the military in 2 seconds. Hey, we got money. Everything's fine. Next issue. But, okay, whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we all do what we do for exactly the same reason. It seemed a good idea at the time.
Absolutely, man.
And had I understood what Bill meant when he said they're going to go nuts, and the snipers hired to find me afterward, I probably would have chosen a different story.
Well, anyway, moving on to DC and Superman, finally. That's awesome. Dan DiDio came to you directly and said Superman, huh?
Yeah, I was at a convention and he pulled me aside and said, I know your contract with Marvel is about up and you're trying to figure out what you want to do next. And we know you're a Stone Superman fan. Would you like to do this graphic novel to reinvent the character? He said, he's kind of considered the big blue Boy Scout. We want to look at reinventing him for another generation. With these hardcover graphic novels that were going to come out on a prestige line. And having grown up on Superman and sort of trying to mold my character where I could to match his, the idea of creating a Superman that was kind of based on my attitudes and beliefs closed the circle in ways that were reverberating in my head for months afterward. Because I got to live inside the character and create a different version of that. And really very proud of what we did with those graphic novels. And there was some contretemps here and there. The fact that he was down the hall from him was a young woman who worked as an escort. And people were upset that he became friends with her. And I'm like, look, she's a person who is trying to figure out a better way to live her life. She can't get there yet. In the Bible, Christ hung out with, tax collectors. Sure. I mean, come on. And she ends up, saving his life. And we see that real strong relationship build between them. And it was really just a chance to sort of take kind of a millennial approach to who the character would be if it came along today. And I was very gratified when the book ended up on the New York Times bestseller list for like 32 weeks just for the first one alone. So that says we did something right.
That's cool, man. And then, God, your success with the Changeling, wow. And again, it starts as we briefly mentioned your journalism period where you discovered the true story. But man, that's terrific to have that kind of in the back of your head for so long, and then for it to finally happen and get the acknowledgement that it did.
Yeah, it's funny as you go down the path of being a writer for year after year after year, you acquire more tools, and you're always seeing what's in the box that will let you tell different kinds of stories. And for years, whenever I looked in the toolbox of the Christine Collins story, I don't have what I need to tell that story. I tried numerous times over the years to make it happen. I couldn't get there. And at a time of great personal crisis, I said, let me look one more time. And I thought I had the tools there this time to make it work, and wrote this spec script and had my agent send it off without any real hopes it would go anywhere. And it sold like, a week after he sent it out to Ron Howard. Then Clint Eastwood came on to direct, and Angelina Jolie came in to star in it. And I went, from being this, sort of middle list TV writer to suddenly an A-list movie writer, which still confounds me. And it went on to do remarkable things. I got nominated for a British Academy Award.
That's excellent.
For that, and there aren't a lot of comic writers who can say that. And it was just, it opened up a lot of opportunities. I was able to do World War Z and work on Underworld Awakening and the first Thor movie. And it changed everything for me. It was such a marvelous opportunity.
Did you have story conferences with Eastwood? What was that like?
It was funny because, again, no one ever shoots the first draft, let alone the spec draft.
Sure.
They always go through a process. And I went to meet with him at his office on the Warner Brothers lot after he'd begun his prep and wanted to show me his research and set designs and that kind of stuff. And we're sitting on his couch in one of Warner's lot, and he's on my left, I'm on his right, and he never looks at me the entire time he's talking to me. He's looking straight ahead at the wall or looking at these pieces of artwork and clippings on the left-hand side of the other wall. And we're wrapping up, and I'm terrified that he's going to say at some point, we're going to bring in someone else to rewrite this, which is what they would normally do. We're still working off the spec. And to try and preclude that, I said, listen, do you need anything changed, any revisions you want to ask for? And he turned, and for the first time, he looked at me. And it was Clint frickin' Eastwood. And I felt my spine go cold. It's like, oh, Jesus. He says, you know how many movies I've made? I'm like, a lot? A lot, he says. And I've got more phone calls on this script than anything else I've ever done not to screw it up. My job is to not screw it up. We're not changing a word of it. Wow. And they didn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's excellent, man.
Scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, man. No, that's... No, that's incredible, man. That's fantastic. And even, prior to Eastwood coming on, like you said, Ron Howard and Grazer at, Imagine and everything, tapping you, because another like Billy Mumy, a guy that grew up in television. I mean, these guys are real visionaries, and it's excellent that they recognize what you were trying to do with Changeling.
Yeah, and it's such nice guys. And although it's funny, I got to kind of realize after a while that most of them walk in a world that I would not want to walk in for a period of time. So, for instance, we were at the Cannes Film Festival for the premiere, and we're going to have dinner the night before, just for the premiere, and I'm getting ready in this hotel in the south of France. And for me, coming from Paterson, New Jersey, and Newark to being in a French villa in the south of France, I mean, come the hell on. I'm getting dressed. And the woman who was doing the coordinating everybody calls up from the lobby to say, listen, Brad, who's here with Angelina Jolie, Brad ran into Mick Jagger at the bar at the hotel. He would like to invite him to join us for dinner. Is it okay? And sure, why not? And so we go to this restaurant, and when Angie and Brad and Clint and the rest of them arrive and they walk in the restaurant, all you see are strobes of flashlights going off and people yelling and calling things out. When I showed up, it was like, who the hell is this? This is someone's dad come to pick up his son or something. And I got nothing. And I realized I can go pretty much anywhere I want. I can work in movies, but I can walk anywhere I want, and no one really gives a crap. These people are trapped. They can't go anywhere without this constantly happening. And I felt so bad for them at that moment. and realize that, I'm happy having the success that I have, but I'm glad my face isn't on camera more. I think the nation feels the same way.
Well, to wrap up, one last question, and I really appreciate you spending as much time with me as you have. Looking towards the future, and again, I mean, you obviously have tons of more ideas. I'm looking forward to what you're doing with Hemis and Axel Alonso with the new company. I hope you'll come back when you guys are, closer to publishing. But do you ever see yourself going back to and ever writing other people's stuff, or is it, just again? I mean, you've got a body of work where you can certainly do your own thing. Is this the plan?
Yeah, I'm reached that point where I'm just kind of cranky in general, and I much prefer to do my own stuff. And look, if someone came up to me and said, "We want you to adapt Stranger in a Strange Land," for that I would crawl naked and bleeding through 5 miles of broken glass and monkey vomit to do that story. But for the most part, I'm looking to do my own stuff. So there's the stuff I'm working with Bill and Axel. I just sold a pitch for a USA pilot.
Oh, great.
So I'm starting writing that next week for the outline. That's going ahead. When I left comics, I took a hiatus for 3 years. I said I wanted to work on novels and plays, as well as the biography. The things that I wanted to do, there's a novel that I've always wanted to write. I can't go into much detail about it now, but it's experimental, it's unconventional, it's controversial, it uses a structure that we haven't seen much before. And I finished it up, and we have a publisher who wants to buy it. There will be more phone calls next week, but if they go as planned, and very few things ever do, but if it does work out, then my first mainstream novel will be coming out sometime soon. So I'm looking to just keep challenging myself, because I think that as a writer or as a human being, you have a choice between having, let's say, 10 years of experience doing something versus 1 year of experience 10 times. You have to keep constantly challenging yourself and pushing yourself and trying things that you're probably going to fail at some of it, but that's the point. It's the military says that failure is an important part of the equation. If you don't fail once in a while, you're not doing it right. You try and get over the wall. You fail, you learn where your weaknesses are, where the wall's weaknesses are, then you try it again, and you get over it, and the wall doesn't stop you, Mr. Trump. And so for me, I need to keep finding those walls and throwing myself against them, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But that process is what keeps me going, the process of risking failure on a huge scale, because everything I do as a writer is out in public. So if I blow it, the whole world knows about it. I can hide the body in the back, also the recent room. So the others take up too much room. So for me, I'm looking forward to spending the next X number of years, just doing the stories I want to do and taking chances and seeing what happens.
That's great, man. Well, again, Becoming Superman, that's Joe's autobiography, and I think aspiring writers are going to get a lot of life lessons and also an appreciation of it's not just you. It is that tough of a road, but just keep moving forward. And that's really the underlying thread of the autobiography, and then really your career, man. So congratulations. Honestly, it's a terrific book, and absolutely worth a read and a purchase. And good luck with the new comic book stuff, and hell, of course, the USA pilot and everything else that's coming up for Joe Stracynski. Congratulations on a great career, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
J. Michael Stracynski, check out his book, Becoming Superman. Sounds like he's got some great projects on the way this year, but if you're a fan of some of this great Stracynski stuff, whether it's Real Ghostbusters or Babylon 5, you're going to like this book a lot. I mean, really amazing conversations, and I really do think it explains why Joe would get up and leave. I mean, he said it himself in the conversation, but we really only, just kind of touched the surface of a lot of what's in the book. It's a really, really impressive book, about 440 pages long, and it's a great story. Like he said, he couldn't even put one more day in there because the book was just getting too long, so I'm glad he covered it here. And Sins Past, wasn't that interesting? I just really enjoyed this conversation with Stracynski. I hope he'll come back. I hope he had a good time. His people told me that he had a good time. That's the good news. So glad to have shared this conversation with you on today's Word Balloon. It's again brought to you by Aftershock Comics, who are having just a great year in this year of reading dangerously, as they call it. Really neat books. Joe Pruitt's horror anthology, Shock. There's Cullen Bunn's coming, Knights Temporal. Chris Sabella just got a new crime book started called Trustfall, and I love it. Matthew Klickstein's You Are Obsolete is coming up soon. Just to be there alongside things like A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Cullen Bunn's Dark Ark and Phil Hester's Stronghold and Marguerite Bennett's Animosity. All great books. Really interesting genre-bending books that deserve your attention. Really quality creators over at Aftershock doing their thing. We'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books in the weeks ahead, but don't wait for it. Check out their website. You will find a book of Aftershocks that you will enjoy. Check out full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your support via Patreon. July isn't over. There's more great word balloons and more I can't believe I'm talking to this person conversations to share with you before the end of July. I can't believe that more than half the year is over, but that we're not stopping here in Word Balloon. There's more great stuff on the way. Stick around for the days ahead to be shocked and amazed by some of the great conversations I was able to have for Word Balloon. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.